Please join me in giving a big Austin, Texas welcome.
Hi, Senator Kerry. You bring up our sense of personal responsibility as citizens and to hold people responsible and accountable. And I was just wondering if you had ever heard of Dr. Stephen Jones. He is a professor and was a professor at Brigham Young University. He was put on leave and then forced into retirement. He did a conference and a presentation here last weekend at the University of Texas put on by the Project New American Citizen. And he discovered by testing World Trade Center dust that there were chemical compounds and the same chemical composition that made up thermate. He believes that this is the result of controlled demolition, and I was just wondering, since you are all for holding people accountable and being personally responsible as a citizen, if you were up to hearing witness and expert testimony as to how the World Trade Centers were brought down by controlled demolition.
Well, that's a new one to me. I'd have to, obviously I'm open to anything that's based on fact and evidence, and if somebody has evidence, I'll take a look at it. I'd be happy to take a look at it.
Also, a question I have for you. World Trade Center 7 was brought down on September 11th at 5:20 in the evening. The leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex, Larry Silverstein, gave a public interview on PBS in 2002, and he said that they pulled that building, which is a demolition term for intentionally bringing down a building. This man made over $5 billion from those buildings' destruction, and I want to know if there was ever a formal investigation into Larry Silverstein, the leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex, and his ties to this entire event.
I don't believe there's been a formal investigation. I haven't heard that. I don't know that. I do know that that wall, I remember, was in danger, and I think that they made a decision based on the danger that it had of destroying other things, that they did it in a controlled fashion. He's part of the reconstruction effort for the memorial and the use of the land, etc. There's been a long tug of war going on in New York. I am not following every aspect of it because it's not in my jurisdiction, so to speak. But I'll check on what the story is. I'll take a look at it based on what you've said. You're the first people anywhere in the country to call this to my attention.
Well, interestingly enough, the 9/11 Commission report does not even address World Trade Center 7 and the fact that it fell the way that it did.
Let me find out about it. I don't know enough about it. It's not in our book.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
That's what you would hope, because this whole downtown area behind me has been completely sealed off and evacuated, apart from the emergency workers. That was done by the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, much earlier today, because of, course, the dreadful collapse of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. But New York, very much a city still in chaos. The phones are not working properly, the subway lines are not working properly. And we know that down there near the World Trade Center, there are 3 schools that are being turned into triage centers for emergency treatment. And I know that over in New York Harbor, where the famous Statue of Liberty is, there's a field hospital where 1,500 people are being treated. And we have heard, though it's unconfirmed as yet, that 100 New York City police officers have been taken there as well for treatment. But we do need to confirm those figures for the officers.
It's now, some 8 hours since the attacks. Is there any estimate yet available of the number of casualties in the World Trade Center?
I think we can only go at this point with the words expressed by the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, that it's too frightening to think how many there could be. We know that it's about almost 300 people on the airliners that were used in these attacks. But you've got to remember, this was 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday morning. It's busy in downtown Manhattan, in the financial district there. And the World Trade Center itself has 50,000 workers. There are tens of thousands of tourists who go up there every day. The figures are almost too frightening to contemplate. You can understand why nobody yet wants to put a figure on them.
Listening to the mayor, Rudy Giuliani, a bit earlier, one of his messages was, business as usual. We won't let this get us down. But presumably, a lot of Manhattan people must have fled the city to Long Island to get away from possible further attacks.
Well, a lot of people were certainly trying to, but you remember that very early on, all the bridges and tunnels to the city, as well as the airports, were closed. New York was sealed, essentially. Now, we do know that the Long Island Railroad has begun running again to get people out of the city if they can, and people who can't manage to get out and perhaps lived in that area, they're being offered accommodation in empty school buildings. But certainly I saw earlier on today huge crowds of people desperately trying to walk up Upper Manhattan to get as far away as possible. I think nobody really knows how to go or where to go, and you have to remember, even now, I don't think people can sink in to people what's happened.
We haven't, for the past hour or so, heard much from the people of Manhattan. You're with them there. I mean, what are they saying tonight after this catastrophic attack?
As I said, many just cannot believe this has happened, and I've seen big burly men and women with tears in their eyes today, shaking their heads, wondering what on earth is going on. There was a sense of panic. Our reports from the scene were of people just absolutely horrified. And I've already seen some photographs of that a man took down in the downtown area, and it looks like the aftermath of a huge atom bomb or something, just full of debris and like a white carpeting of snow from all the dust and rubbish that had fallen. I don't think people can comprehend. They certainly have lost any feeling of safety. There's still a great pride in the city. People are determined to fight back, but a great sense of shock and loss. People keep looking at the sky, for example, where you can see the plume of smoke and say, when that's gone, it won't be there anymore. Our Twin Towers won't be there. Such a symbol of New York.
Are they talking yet about revenge and what the government should do to counter this threat, or are they numb still?
I think people are still numb, and I don't think people are talking